Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-host, Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, Emily Morgan, Delegate Solutions, Richard Durso, RTD Financial, and Steve Hart. And Matthew, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the show today, please?
Sure can. We have a really exciting show in store. We're starting off with Marcia O'Connor, the president and CEO of the O'Connor Group. Then we have Betty Long, the founder and president of Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates, followed by Michael Wiley, the president of Chane Solutions, and wrapping it up with Lauren Iannucci, the executive director of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Eastern Pennsylvania chapter.
Excellent. Let's get to know our first guest, who is Marcia O'Connor, president and CEO of the O'Connor Group. Marcia, what's the O'Connor Group? What are you guys doing?
Yes, hello. The O'Connor Group is an outsourced HR and recruiting organization in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. And where are you from originally?
I am from a small town, Folsom, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. So it's near Philadelphia. And how many brothers and sisters do you have? And where are you in the pecking order?
I had a sister, and I am the youngest. I was the youngest of two.
All right. And tell me, when you were a kid, how young were you when you started making money, and what were you doing?
I started when I was about 10 years old, and I started shoveling snow and mowing lawns.
Uh-huh. You started shoveling snow and mowing lawns. Didn't you do some other stuff where you would get a client and you would keep doing more and more stuff for him? Is that true?
That is true. So I wouldn't just do mow the lawn. I would actually weed the garden. I would hedge take care of all the hedges.
All right. So it sounds to me like when you got a client, you really tried to service him when you were 10 years old. What's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
Yes, it's about all attention to detail and listening to your customer. And so I remember faintly my next door neighbor, he was very, very picky. And he had said, you do a good job, but you could even do better. And so that's when I started doing the extra. And I take that into my work today, where it's not just having a conversation with the client, but it's basically deep diving and asking them why they're doing things and how we can do things better. So
perfect. Drew?
Marcia, you told us that when you were in third grade, your sister let you know you were adopted. What was the impact of that?
Oh, Drew, I was fuming. I felt like a misfit. I felt as if I didn't really have a true family, and I got very angry at that time.
And what is the impact today of that happening?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, being adopted is a wonderful thing in my life. I feel as if I'm different, but we're all different, and everybody has a story. And once you get to know that person and their story, you realize their impact on the world and the decisions that they've made.
So it sounds like you took a tough situation and turned it on its head.
I like to think so. Yes, I do that to this day. And like I said,
what do you do to this day? What are you talking about?
So what I do with clients is I do basically a lot of HR and recruiting. So we go into a client.
So you're telling me about the way you felt is exactly what you're doing. Matthew.
You told us earlier, Marcia, that you saw the guys mowing the lawns and doing the snow removal, and you said you could do that too. How young were you, and how did you get that sense that gender didn't matter and you were going to do it as good as the guys?
Well, I was always told you can do anything you want in life.
Who told you that?
My dad.
How did he tell you that?
My dad just said, you know what, come on, you're going to come with me to do different jobs, and you're going to figure out how it works.
What kind of jobs did he have you helping him with?
Well, one in particular was basically fixing toilets. So we would watch him how to fix the toilet.
So this comfort that you have that you can do anything, what's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
Because you can go into any client and fix out any situation and help them fix their problem.
Okay. Shannon?
Marcia, earlier you told us you grew up in Delco, just outside of Philly. Tell us what was going on for fun in your neighborhood.
Great question. We were actually always just outside all the time, and we would find friends to basically pick up a game and play along with. It wasn't a who's who, but it was basically fitting in and being part of the teams.
Tell us more about what was going through your head during that.
Well, you know what? It was more along the lines of figuring out how people had gotten picked and how people basically played on different teams, and just listening and analyzing how we got basically on different teams and why people got selected over other people. And that's how I started mowing lawns, because I would realize knocking on the doors and asking them to give me a shot and figuring out what they were talking about.
What's that analyzing people have to do with what you do nowadays?
Oh, well, it has everything to do with what I do now in regards to going into a client and figuring out, if someone's in the right role and why they are or not.
All right. Sounds like you were doing that as a kid. It makes a lot of sense you're doing it as an adult. Richard.
Marcia, in the green room, you mentioned some money management skills that you learned from your parents. Can you talk a little more about the 10 envelopes?
Absolutely. The 10 envelopes were basically the various little savings accounts my mother put together on the dining room table when my dad gave her the check every Friday. And he would cash it, and she would put the money aligned into each area. And that's basically was our little savings system growing up.
How's that affect you today?
I will always have a reserve, Rich, and I usually have a few savings accounts as well, because you never know of that rainy day, and I refuse to ever
Emily?
do that again.
Yeah, my parents did the same. You mentioned also in the green room about how your sister is the one who told you were adopted at a young age. And I'm curious how your parents handled that with you and what you might have learned from that you brought to your work today.
Well, I think when you were told in third grade, you were angry, you don't understand it, and you would basically, I would react out, and I wasn't an angry kid. So my mother had to sit me down and talk to me about it, and so did my father. But at that age, you don't really understand it. I do now in my life and I'm more appreciative than ever because it takes an awful lot for somebody to adopt somebody and raise them as their own.
Mm-hmm. Stephen.
You said being trustworthy was a requirement in your childhood businesses. How does that translate into your businesses today?
I think trust is everything we have. And regarding what I do, it's all about your reputation and your trust and getting back to your clients. And so being brought up and doing the right thing, my father always instilled that in me, is do the right thing no matter what, even if it's going to cost us the client.
Yeah, I mentioned, Marcia, earlier you mentioned that you found something out when I think you were about 10 years old. What was that, and how did that affect you and the dynamics in the family?
Sure. It's when my parents sat me down and told me my sister had Ewing sarcoma, which is a pretty nasty bone cancer. And our whole life basically went upside down after that. And I was at Children's Hospital pretty much every week for about 2 years with my sister.
Mm-hmm. How did that affect you?
Well, I became a little caregiver. I was the one with her in the bedrooms after she took the magic red pill, we called it. And typically she would take that 10 o'clock in the morning at CHOP. We would get home. By 2 o'clock, she was throwing up all over, and I was the one basically helping her clean all that up.
What's that have to do with who you are now?
I try to be very caring and giving, and I'm always a very supportive person to try to do and help others that are less fortunate or going through things. And like I said, everybody has a story. You just have to take the time to listen to it.
So is that what you do for a living?
I do. I fix things, and I basically take care of things, and I basically make my clients process and run smoother. So
you bring to your clients a lot of personality traits you had as a kid. Am I correct about that?
Yes, that is.
Matthew?
You said right before we went on, you were going to talk about a lot of things that you were passionate about. Where do you get your passion?
Apparently, I was born with it. My father told me at least 5 years old, I was the happiest kid running around, and nothing ever really bothered me, and I didn't get upset very much. I'm a very emotional person, so I have a deep feeling about individuals and people, but I like to try to convey that with my team and take care of my team at the same time, especially through this pandemic right now.
You don't have to hide your passion when you're managing a company?
You don't have to hide it, but you have to basically be real about it. But you'd have to understand when you are the chief bottle washer that if you're sweating, they're taking a bath.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what else are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm just curious. You stepped over some pretty big hurdles as a youngster, and I'm just curious what your advice would be to somebody that was maybe facing some headwinds, 10 to 14.
That no matter how difficult that your life becomes, the things that you're learning today will help you more than you can ever imagine. And not only that, you're going to help impact so many other people in your life because of what you've been through.
Wow. Marcia, what's the website address for this organization known as the O'Connor Group? What's your website address? TOCGRP.com. Let me have that one more time.
Certainly. TOCGRP.com.
We've been speaking with Marcia O'Connor, who's president and CEO of the O'Connor Group here on Executive Leaders Radio. Let's see here. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We will be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go away. We'll be back with our next guest shortly. And your name and organization is?
Krista Hershala with Delegate Solutions.
And what do you do there?
I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships, so I help build relationships with people and companies that can
How young were you when you started doing that stuff?
Probably fifth grade. Started building relationships with my friends on the softball team when I switched schools in fifth grade.
So you switched schools in fifth grade and you started developing relationships with the other kids. And you think that has something to do with who you are nowadays? What do you mean?
I do. I think that building those relationships and wanting to collaborate with people and help people on a team has really helped to build what I'm doing today.
And what's your website address?
Our website is delegatesolutions.com.
Let me have that one more time, please.
Yeah, delegatesolutions.com.
And this has been your Business Spotlight. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Betty Long, founder and president of Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates. Betty, what is Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates? What are you guys doing?
Herb, we are a patient advocacy organization. We are nurse-run, nurse-led. So when you're dealing with a scary diagnosis or a life-threatening diagnosis, we're going to be there with you to help you through it.
Wow, what a valuable service. Where are you from originally?
Originally from Southwest Philadelphia.
How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
Well, I am the baby of 6.
Drew?
Betty, you were quite an athlete as a youngster, 4 older brothers. You mentioned pretty much every sport, went to college to play tennis. But when we asked your favorite sport, you mentioned flag football. How come flag football?
Because I got to play at Veterans Stadium and win a championship.
And didn't you mention you like to be part of a team as well?
Yeah, I've always played sports my entire life. That was something that was passionate to me based on my brothers. But I think that being part of a team, I have strengths that I bring to the team, but I also know that there are other strengths I don't have and I need. And
does that relate to what you're doing today?
Translates very well into what I do. I am the CEO and president, and I know certain parts of the business, but I also have 40 nurses who all know different parts, different diagnoses, different patients, so it works.
Matthew?
Betty, tell me about the connection between growing up playing sports with 4 older brothers and advocating for people. I feel like it's got to be there. Explain it to me.
Well, I don't think it was an easy, it's not an easy connection, Matt. I was going to be a sports writer growing up. That was the connection. And then my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when she was 61. I was 21. So I shifted.
What made you shift?
A nurse that I met while she was in the hospital. Mom only lived 4 months from diagnosis. And Marcia was really the reason that I became a nurse.
What did Marcia do?
She basically was caring and kind and funny and took really good care of my mom.
And you told us before that she knew what you needed too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, she anticipated the day I was getting off the elevator the first time to visit my mom after the diagnosis. Marcia took me aside, put me in a chapel, brought my mom in a wheelchair. I don't remember the conversation, but I remember that Marcia knew what I needed when I didn't even know what I needed. So fast forward to, now I try to make sure that we're anticipating our patients' needs and going above and beyond to provide that level of service.
Shannon?
Hey, can you tell us a little bit more about your mom and what she was like when you were growing up?
Yeah, she was the life of the party, matriarch of the family, Irish, kind of always fun to be around, told good jokes, and always took good care of me because as the baby of the family, I think she felt bad for me. I wasn't getting much attention from my brothers.
What did you learn from Mom that you still carry with you today, Betty?
She really was a good role model for being independent, for doing the right thing, right? For always being honest, to have integrity, that you're responsible to other people to help them. So I think she was my role model really early on.
Richard?
Eddie, what was your role on your flag football team?
I was the quarterback.
Well, how's that affect you today?
No surprise there. So I use a lot of sports analogies with my team. One of them that I often use is we have to look downfield. We have to huddle up. We got to look downfield for opportunity. We got to look downfield for patience and what they need. So I like the language of football at least.
Mm-hmm. Emily, what are you thinking?
Well, in the green room, you were talking about being the youngest of all the children and pivoting in college from being a writer to being a nurse. And when I hear those two things, I hear that you must have a trait of being very adaptable. And I'm just curious how that plays into what you do now.
Yeah, I think Emily probably came from being the baby of 6 and constantly being, teased and told to, run after that ball. But as I got older, I think that, sports has really prepared me to be adaptable, right? Game situations, you have to change, you have to pivot. So I think being an athlete has really contributed to that too.
Mm-hmm. Stephen?
You've had a long and illustrious career over 30 years. And aside from the mom and the nurse, who are the other people who have had an influence on you?
Well, I would be remiss during Nurses Week 2020 to not say Florence Nightingale. But many of the women that I've worked with over the years have really made an impact on my life in terms of nursing career.
Mm-hmm.
In what ways have they influenced you?
I think that their leadership, their honesty and their integrity, right? Always doing the right thing, thinking about what's right for the patient, not necessarily what's right for the organization, always keeping the focus on the patient.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what else are you thinking?
Just curious, Betty, when you were competing at the variety of sports you played, did your family support you? Like, did they come watch?
No one. They were working. My parents were both working. I remember in senior year, my last field hockey game, I looked across and I saw my mother and I was like, wait, what happens? Mom here, what's going on?
So, what did that mean to you to see mom make her way?
Oh, it was great. It was great. It was our last game, but they were too busy working to come to our games.
Did they realize the athlete you were?
I think so, especially when I got the tennis scholarship for college.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might have figured it out then.
Matthew?
So Selma, let's talk a little bit about the tennis. How young when you started playing tennis?
So I was about 10. I was walking to play softball at the local recreation center, and there was a guy there at the tennis courts saying, hey, girls, you want to play tennis? And we're like, nah. And he goes, we'll give you a racket and a T-shirt. And I was like, yeah, okay, great.
And did you play singles or doubles?
Singles. I was the #1 singles player.
So playing singles is tough, right? Sometimes you're out there on the court by yourself. You got to keep hitting the ball, staying consistent. How do you keep yourself focused out there in points?
Yeah, well, tennis is obviously a different game than team sports. It's all on you. It's a lot of head, right? You can't get down on yourself, so you just got to keep plugging away and playing point by point.
What do you say to yourself? What do you say to yourself to keep from getting down on yourself when you're on the court?
Oh, I'm doing the best I can. Maybe I'm playing a better opponent, but I'm going to give it the best shot I have. Right?
How's that helping you build the business?
Oh, good question, Herb. Yeah, just bit by bit over 17 years, right? Just kind of putting it together and kind of looking downfield and thinking we got to put a good team together. My responsibility is to set the tone, and we have a great time together. We really do good work.
When you go to work and faced with like tough decisions and stuff, what do you hear your mom whispering in your ear?
What's right for the patient?
What do you mean by that?
So, we're faced with really critical problems for families, right? And so it doesn't matter. We have to focus on the patient and do what's right. And we have to make that happen. I'll just tell you a quick story. I used to get Breyer's ice cream and mint chocolate chip. There was not enough chips. And my mom said to me, well, if you're frustrated, write a letter. So I wrote a letter to Breyer's and said, there's not enough chocolate chips in my half gallon of ice cream. And didn't I get 2 free coupons of ice cream? So I learned the value then of speaking up.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so how does that translate to the business, your ability to speak up? What's that have to do with your business model?
Oh, or we got hundreds of patients that don't feel like they have a voice in the healthcare system. And our nurses can be there with them and be the voice and empower them to speak up, to feel like they know what they're doing, to have informed consent, and to feel like there's a partnership with their physicians. It really is so important, especially now.
What's the website address for your business, Betty, Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates?
It's guardiannurses.com.
Let me have that one more time.
guardiannurses.com.
We've been speaking with Betty Long, founder and president of Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders, and we will be back in a moment right after this break. Don't go away. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Michael Wiley, president of Chane Solutions. Michael, what is Chane Solutions? What are you guys doing?
Chane is a national background and drug screening company.
Mm-hmm. And where are you from originally?
I grew up in Roxborough in Philadelphia.
What kind of neighborhood was Roxborough back then when you grew up?
Blue collar, working class.
Mm-hmm. Row houses?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I'm the oldest of 3.
Okay. Drew.
Yeah, Michael, you told us you were quite an athlete growing up. Started out in kind of youth football, but then pivoted to lacrosse. What did you like about lacrosse?
Well, the main thing was that I was the same size as everybody on the field. In football, I just didn't get big enough.
And what position were you?
I was a goalie. In lacrosse.
Goalies are kind of crazy, aren't they?
I guess that's a perception, yeah.
And you mentioned like the mental part of being a goalie was really important. What do you mean by that?
Well, it really comes down to a few things. It's one, being comfortable in the cage, being not afraid to take a shot, and really being that quarterback on the defensive side of the field of coaching and pushing the other players and trying to get them, whether it's breaking out or cover a guy that they're not seeing, or someone's cutting that they're not seeing, that kind of thing.
How does that vision and kind of that strategic leadership impact you today in what you're doing?
Well, it definitely helps with coaching and delegating and kind of setting the agenda or setting the direction of where we want to go. Sometimes you have to take the ball and do it yourself, and in other cases, you need to rely on some of your key team members.
Matthew?
Yeah, you told us earlier that your lacrosse career was the result of a sports scholarship that took you from your row house neighborhood out to a fancy-dancy private school. Tell us, and you even told us about the physical path. Tell us how you got to school each day.
Sure. We would. There were a couple of kids from my neighborhood that went to GA, and we would carpool together. And I just remember sitting in the back of the car and driving up Henry Avenue, and it seemed as though you could almost watch the clouds open up, and it got much sunnier, and there was suddenly grass and no more graffiti and all the other good stuff that you become accustomed to in the city.
And how's that affect you today? That kind of living in two worlds, right? In the row house world and at the fancy private school.
I love it. I love it only from the perspective of I really enjoy interacting with all walks of life, right? So it really doesn't matter to me if someone's got a nickel in their pocket or $2 billion. I really love interacting with both aspects of kind of society.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Michael, tell us about how young you were when you started making money and what were you doing?
I started young. I would say first grade, second grade. So that's probably 7, 8 years old or so. And I was doing all the stuff around the neighborhood, like cutting grass. I was shoveling snow. I would do just about anything that I could figure out. I loved to work. So I'd skip playing with the kids and try and line that kind of work up.
And in the green room, you mentioned something about picking dandelions for your mother and also some neighbors. Tell us more about that.
Well, it wasn't for my neighbors. My mother asked me to pick the dandelions out of our yard, and she said that she would give me a nickel as long as I could get the whole root system out for everyone I picked. So I picked everyone in our yard, and then I looked over at the neighbor's yard, and they had dandelions, and I figured, well, if I just get them, I'll just add it to the amount that my mom will pay me. So I did a few yards and then brought it home. And
every dandelion, it sounds like you were pretty thorough. What does that have to do with what you're doing today?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't think of it like this, but we're in the criminal background screening business, and these reports have to be flawless. They have to be perfect. They have to be thorough and include every aspect so that you can really get an idea of who you're hiring and who you're going to put in front of some of your coworkers or next to one of your coworkers.
Mm-hmm. Richard?
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the culture shock that you experienced coming from the Roxborough section of Philly, going to a prestigious private school in Germantown Academy?
Yeah, it's simple things like your car. My parents didn't necessarily drive the nicest vehicles up there, so they weren't in a Mercedes or a BMW, and everyone else was. The kids that I went to school with, most of them had silver spoons in some respects. That their clothes were much nicer. They were going on ski trips and things like that, and that just wasn't in the cards for us at the time, right? So I tended to congregate with the other athletes that were blue collar and folks that were, either from Roxborough or similar neighborhoods.
Was there a sense of deserving that you felt?
Never. No. I felt like I needed to continue to prove myself, whether that was academically or if that was on the field. I still feel that today.
What's that have to do with who you are? Yeah, what's that have to do with who you are nowadays, the fact you didn't feel deserving?
I really, really appreciate everything I have in my life. I feel like everything I have in my life is been through hard work.
Why is the company called Chane Solutions?
So Chane, everything. Funny you asked that, Herb. Everything I do is really for my family, my wife and my boys. And I was trying to come up with a name, and I had 100 different names I was thinking of, and eventually I just went and looked at my boys, Chase and Shane, and I kind of just merged the names.
What's the similarity between being a dad and being the CEO of this business?
It is all about leading by example. That's what it is. It really is. I want my boys to see how I would like them to operate in the world, how they interact with their friends and their neighbors and all that kind of thing.
Emily?
Can you tell us a little bit about your parents and maybe what that instilled in you that you're applying today?
So my folks are very blue collar folks. My dad was a retired police officer in Philadelphia, and my mother was an office clerk in the beginning. So, the majority of the stuff that I feel like I've pulled from them is all about just integrity, character, perseverance. We didn't have it easy as a family, as kids. We didn't make a ton of money, and we did what we could with what we had.
Stephen?
Yeah, Michael, you said you were, even though you're undersized, you were captain of a football team one time. And you said that's because you pushed yourself and you pushed your team. How does that translate to how you do your business today?
Well, I can tell you that I've set goals within the organization that I know are a stretch. But I also set those goals when I have some of my key players looking at me going, we're not ready for this. I understand that to a certain extent, but I want to push us to get to a level that we're closer. It's kind of, there's a aim small, miss small. I forget the movie that's from. But
so this fact that the company is named for your two sons, and you're so family oriented, how's that helped you build your team? What effect has that had on your building the team?
I value loyalty more than anything. I will run through fire.
Where'd you get that loyalty thing from? Where'd that come from?
I think that's growing up in a quote unquote cop's house, right? My father was a police officer, cop in Philly, and that's just something that's just an intrinsic value that he had, and every other.
What is?
Being intensely loyal to your friends, to your family.
Huh. You picked that up from your dad, huh?
Yeah.
Michael, I'm curious, after being the goalie is rugged, because if you have a bad day, it's kind of sits on your back a little bit. And I'm just curious, what did your dad tell you after maybe a bad game? What was his advice to you?
He would do. I think what he did is he taught me to be critical, and critical in a good way, critical of myself, but not necessarily let it hold me down, but critical of being able to break down whether it was mechanically something I did incorrectly, or
Michael, what's the website address of Chane Solutions? Your website address?
Website is Chane, Chane, solutions.com.
We've been speaking with Michael Wiley, president of Chane Solutions, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment, right after this business spotlight. Don't go away. Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Lauren Iannucci, Executive Director of Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, Eastern Pennsylvania Chapter. Lauren, what is Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, Eastern Pennsylvania Chapter? What are you guys doing?
So we're the largest nonprofit dedicated to creating a world without blood cancer.
Whoa. Where are you from originally?
Both Gaithersburg, Maryland, and also Bluebell, Pennsylvania.
And how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I am the oldest I have one brother that's 7 years younger than me.
Drew.
Lauren, so you moved when I think you were in 7th grade, is that right?
That's correct.
And what was that like? That's a tough time to move.
Very tough time to move. I was devastated, and at the time probably did not like my parents for doing that.
And how did you make it work? Like what happened to settle in?
I was in a small parochial school, and I feel like I could make friends pretty quickly. So I did that, as well as through athletics, through sports.
And you were a basketball player?
I was.
And what do you love about basketball?
Well, number one, the team aspect of it, and just the competitiveness. I could never play golf. I could always play something that was a little bit more active.
And how has being, part of a team helped you, what you do today?
Absolutely. I mean, my job in the role that I am as the executive director, I oversee 20 staff, and in that role, I feel that I'm, it's all about the team. It's all about what we do, and collaborate because we have such a small team.
Matthew?
Lauren, did your parents know how unhappy you were about the move?
They absolutely did. I would write on the wall that I hated being there. And, in the first few months, it's very tough.
So how did they, so you had a little rebellion there. How did they react to the rebellion?
Yeah, I was a goody two-shoes normally, so this was a pretty bad rebellion. But my parents, are very caring, loving people and would always insert themselves in the right place in my life. So I feel like they really tried to wrap their arms around the situation and be there for me in every aspect.
So it sounds like they were supportive and they kind of found the right outlets for you to help you adjust.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what did you learn from how they handled your rebellion?
They always strive to help me be the best person that I could be. And I feel like, that is something that I apply to through my whole life in sports as well as through my job now, is really trying to make sure my staff feel the best, to be the best they can be.
Shannon?
Lauren, how young were you when you realized the impact that cancer can have on individuals as well as families?
So I was actually a senior in college when I lost my uncle to blood cancer. I was right around the holidays my senior year.
And how did that affect you?
It affected myself, my family, really, really bad. He was an athlete at Boston University, played basketball. Jersey's retired there, so he's someone that a lot of people looked up to and kind and gave back and had 2 sons. So it affected me, my family, tremendously.
And how does that relate to what you're doing nowadays?
Sure. So I, got involved as a volunteer for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society way back then when I worked in the sports industry and, really ran and continued to do my athletic endeavors through team and training. And then, fast forward to what I do today is really make sure we're giving back to this community, and I do it for my uncle and in his memory.
Richard.
Or what messages did you learn from your parents about giving back?
So my parents both worked full-time, but my mother, working in retail, she still found the time to give back, whether it's gifts or have great holiday gatherings. Everything was always pretty perfect, even with her working as much as she did. But she was always giving back to the community and the people around her.
How does that affect you today in your current role?
That is my number one goal. Not only do I do that for my staff and make sure that they are feeling that I'm there and supportive of them, but I feel like with our partners and the individuals that we work with and the patients and their families is I'm constantly making sure that they, are given what they need, not only for the patient support that we can provide, but just the relationships.
Emily?
Yeah, you mentioned growing up that one of the things that you did was babysitting. So I'm curious what you feel that you did differently from your friends and what that has to do with your work today.
I was a babysitter at a very young age. I think it's because my brother was 7 years younger, so I was a second mom to him. And I was very attentive, no matter if it was one child or 4 children I was babysitting for. I think that it relates today as I'm very attentive to the needs of my staff. I put them first and I make sure their work is put first. It's all about them and what they've accomplished. And then also with our partners and also patients and families is being very attentive to their needs.
Stephen.
Lauren, how do you think your ability to make friends quickly in 7th grade contributes to your ability to build a great team today?
I think I can relate to almost anyone. I bring it back to, yes, in 7th grade when I had to make friends quickly, or also in college where I had teammates that were from all across the world. So, I was very relatable to pretty much anyone that I was friends with.
You told us a great story about a mentee of yours. What's that story?
So actually I just got an email last week from someone that worked for me as an intern at the Cowboys when I worked there. And she is now a vice president of relationships or partnerships at the New Jersey Devils at the Prudential Center. And she just wrote how I've inspired her throughout her career and how I was able to really help her through times where she was applying for different jobs.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel, wonderful. It's probably the best feeling in the world to know that someone that you mentored is really succeeding and is out there excited about their roles.
Drew?
Yeah, I just want to go back to basketball. When you were playing in high school, did your parents show up to your games?
They did. I would say majority of my father was there at every game, everything he could be at. My mom still was working in retail, so it was very hard for her to get to everything. But
what did that mean to you as a player to look over and see your dad there?
It meant everything. It meant everything to me. It was amazing to have his support always, and it's something I look forward to doing for my child one day.
And do you think that strength allowed you to walk on to a D1 team?
It did. He probably is my number one rock then and today when it came to walking onto the team. And
what did you hear when you walked on that court the first time? What did you hear your dad telling you?
That I got there for a great job. I did a great job getting there.
What's that stuff about your dad and your feeling about your dad? What's that have to do with what you do for a living nowadays?
I would say my father has been, again, the biggest support. So for me to be able to support not only my team and my chapter and then within the organization, but also these patients and their families and what we do in our community.
Do you like your job?
I am very passionate about my job, if you can't tell. I love what I do.
Why?
Because I feel like I make a difference every day. We are helping to save lives and helping to fund, this incredible research as well as provide support for families.
So you're really built, this is really a mission for you, isn't it?
It is a mission. It's something that's personal as well as professional. Mm-hmm. It's become, I didn't start in this career path.
Yeah. Matthew?
I'm curious. I'm going to do a twist on a normal question. How young were you when you were first raising money for a cause?
I probably was in middle school.
And what was it?
Yeah, I did. I ended up handling money at an event for the Javi Foundation, actually, someone that's very close to me and my family.
And how did you learn how to ask people for money for a cause? Like, what's the key to that? Not everyone can do it.
Because it's easy. Someone could say no, but you have to ask. You have to ask.
What's the website address for this organization known as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Eastern Pennsylvania chapter? What's your website?
So LLS.org.
Let me have that one more time.
LLS.org.
We've been speaking with Lauren Iannucci, who's the Executive Director of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Eastern Pennsylvania chapter. And Matthew, could you give us a rundown on who else we've had the opportunity of hanging out with today, please?
Sure can. It was a really great show. We started with Marcia O'Connor, the president and CEO of the O'Connor Group. Then we had Betty Long, the founder and president of Guardian Nurses Healthcare Advocates. Michael Wiley, the president of Chane Solutions, and just now wrapping up, Lauren Iannucci, the executive director of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the Eastern Pennsylvania chapter.
Excellent. I would like to thank my co-hosts, including Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, Emily Morgan, Delegate Solutions, Richard Durso, RTD Financial, and Steve Hart for giving me a hand structuring the questions and hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I hope we provided our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and do have a nice day. Bye-bye.